And basically, at the time, I would have bet that the new store in 2003 would have been located in Langley. So Ikea owns the property. The solution is to build a new store in Langley, sell the Coquitlam location and close it, or build it into a mall. Ikea owns lots of property all around the world with different uses. You have to concede the error and then take action. And what you would have is you'd have two stores that today together would get, I would estimate, 30 to 40% overnight increase for the market as a whole. And then both stores would be doing sufficient volume to provide a proper return on the company's investment. The problem right now is the profits they're making aren't justifying the expenditure they've made in this market, but it's their own fault. There's nothing wrong with the profitability of the IKEA concept and IKEA stores, as long as you run them right.
Keith, thank you. Just a quick question. We just heard from Mark about a change in values and philosophy and culture in IKEA. A quite recent change, by the sounds of things. Would you link that change specifically to the opening of the other store and the economic pressures that's been brought to bear on your situation in Richmond?
With respect to Mark, respectfully, I would say it has been in process in a slow way for longer than that. I think it goes back to when the head office moved to Toronto from the Richmond store, and the original people from Sweden, who were the pioneers of IKEA in North America, left the head office. And what happens over time is, in order to fill high positions in the organization, they'll tend to recruit from other retailers in North America. And so the erosion of the Swedish values was accelerated as they brought in more people from Best Buy and other large retailers. They walk into IKEA and they say, why do you do things this way? When the whole retail industry does things differently. I would say that since 2003, the performance issues financially have brought into sharp focus the acceleration of what Mark has talked about. Absolutely. They now have performance measures, productivity measures, and all that, where they pound the table and they say, we're going to do things in a different way than we've done them before because you're not performing. Unfortunately, those different ways are what created the original success.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. Please. And now we're going to call our first international speaker, and we call for Tim Beattie from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, US.
Thank you, Chair. I am the Global Strategies Director for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters based in Washington, D.C. And in that role, I represent our union in the Union Network International. Their logo is here on your screen. UNI's webpage is UNIGLOBALUNION, uniglobalunion.org. And I'm going to refer to some documents that are from a network that UNI created. So UNI is the global federation that unites retail workers around the globe. And then they have a subsection where they've coordinated between unions, particularly that represent workers at IKEA. So the work that this coordinating body, this Global Alliance, has done over the last few years, I'm on that Global Alliance, and so I just want to summarize some of our findings. I think they'll be enlightening for the Commission because I find some coincidences between some of what's going on at the experience of the workers here at the Richmond store and things that are happening in some parts of IKEA around the world. Last time we met, our UNI Global Union Alliance was back in May 2013 in Stockholm. And we completed a couple of reports for that meeting. One was a survey of the 40 unions in 16 countries that are part of the Coordinating Alliance, and surveyed them on a number of issues as far as labor relations between the company and its unions in those 16 different countries. And we began by taking a look at what it is that UNI is committed to as far as labor standards. And they have a high standard that's called I-Way, Ikea Way of Purchasing, I-Way. And it has a number of core principles. And the core principles that have to do with labor relations and are based upon the fundamental principles and rights at work of the International Labor Organization. There's also something in the 1992 Rio Declaration on Sustainable Development that's the basis of their own policies. And the guiding principles of the United Nations Global Compact. So these are all international documents that define labor standards, among other things, and these are all the basis for IKEA's own standards. So IKEA wants to be in compliance with some of the best standards globally around labor relations. And more recently, the company has also signed on to the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So all of these are standards that the labor movement internationally has been involved with developing. IKEA makes those their own standards, and in general, not only do they say they want to meet these standards, they want to surpass these standards. And that is part of what IKEA states as its own standards in its company and what it wants its management to comply with. And so when we asked our 40 unions in 16 different countries that are part of our network what's going on, what we found was terrific labor relations, very, very strong, high standards, world-class standards in some countries, certainly beginning with the home country of IKEA in Sweden. Also the case with Germany, a neighbor country. And for many years in most of Western Europe as well, good relations. But the reports that we got from the survey indicated that recently the standards in some parts of Europe are diminishing. So in Spain, in Portugal, in some of the other countries in Europe, standards are not as good as they used to be. And there's more frustration being experienced by the unions there. There are a set of countries where we found from the reports that the relationships are really distressing. That there's even a violation of the fundamental right for workers to join a trade union in countries like Russia and in Turkey. Turkey was referred to earlier. Part of the reason that Turkey was referred to earlier is our global alliance has made a point of shedding and sort of shining a spotlight on the problems in Turkey, and in dialogue with the company to see if we can get these problems resolved and that workers in Turkey at IKEA stores can have respect for their fundamental rights to freedom of association, or their ability to form a union. So evidence seems to show from our surveys that in its expansion drive, IKEA has failed to implement some of its own standards and commitments, including even violations of international standards that are the basis for its own internal standards, and certainly violation of the sort of Swedish values that we come to know and associate with IKEA. They come for us from not only from being part of the company, but also from our conversations, particularly with our colleagues in the unions in Sweden. So we saw a sort of a tendency that was concerning to us, that it seems like the farther you get away from Sweden, there's a greater frequency in which we find problems with violations of IKEA's own commitments. And this is something that we're really concerned about, that may be something that is affecting what's going on here in Richmond as well. So I mentioned the actual violation of trade union rights in Turkey and Russia. There's also some problems currently in Poland, actual violation of trade union rights. The company is simply denying folks the right to form a union, even when a majority of workers in a store want to form a union. There's problems in various countries with occupational health and safety. There's problems with violation of the Highway Code of Conduct I mentioned countries like Spain and Portugal, Italy, France as well. Folks are feeling like what was a set of standards that they understood, and this echoes some of what I just heard from some of the folks that are working in the store in Richmond, that what was standards that they came to appreciate and really gain an affinity with the company are things that are changing in the management these days in the company. And so what we're trying to do in our Ikea Global Union Network of Uni is to come together and get a dialogue going with the company in order to see if we can find a way to create a different standard based upon a better understanding of the issues that the company is facing in different parts of the world and how we can work together at a global level to dialogue. And we will make sure, from our perspective, that the results of your commission report are made available to all of the members of our Ikea Global Alliance and enter into our conversation with the company. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm open to questions for the panel.
And in your understanding, what sort of authority and I'm subject to the word now, in terms of Ikea Global, what sort of influence can they bring to bear on a dispute like this?
I mean, our alliance includes unions, for example, Handels in Sweden and Verdi in Germany, that continue to have very good social dialogue, labor relations with the company in their home countries. These are countries that have high density, high volumes of sales for Ikea, and a very good relationship with their local management, particularly the case of the Swedes. Then they have an influence over the global management as well. And there is a belief among many of the members of our alliance that through appropriate social dialogue, if we sit down and actually can get the right facts, that's part of why I think the commission that you're doing is so important. If we can get the right facts and get to a common understanding of what the real issues are, and shed a spotlight on the difference between the standards that the company itself has set with what is actually happening in reality in these locations, then we can begin to build a plan for how to move from where we are to where we need to be to comply with the own internal standards of the company. That's where we want to go, and what we're going to try and do.
Thanks, Tim. I'm wondering if you could potentially provide some other examples of other companies where that approach of social dialogue has been successful at that level.
At the global level, there are a number of companies that premise their labor relations on the idea that having a strong independent union makes management and makes the company better. And this seems quite logical to me anyway. I can take, for example, a company like the French company Danone. The French company Danone has unions recognized in all of their facilities. They have an annual meeting where they gather together worker union representatives from all those facilities, have a conversation about what's going on, learn directly from workers in presence of management, but with the workers being able to speak freely about what the situation is. There's a monitoring of the labor relations at a local level. There's a constant dialogue going on at the local, regional, and international level about issues like health and safety. like the rights of women in the workplace, a number of different dialogues that happen in the context of the worker representatives through the union speaking with the managers. It's one of a number of examples just to give you an idea. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way, and I don't think it's the vision of the standards of IKEA that they've set for themselves.
Tim, I have another question for you. The union is working very hard to sign what we call global framework agreement. And to my knowledge, IKEA doesn't have any global framework agreement. But the subsidiary of IKEA, Sweden, has a global framework agreement. Can you make some comments on that?
Yeah, an international framework agreement is an agreement between a global federation like UNI with a global corporation from the UNI side on behalf of its affiliates, like for example it might be for the IKEA Alliance, in which we set out a set of standards that the company and the union movement at the global level agreed to, and then a mechanism to be able to monitor developments along these standards that we set, normally along lines of freedom of association and collective bargaining, things like that. Yes, Swedwood, so the woodworking and furniture manufacturing division of IKEA, does have a global framework agreement with the Building and Woodworkers International, BWI. BWI is the global federation like UNI or like ITF that represents workers in the construction and woodworking unions around the world. And this agreement has to do with labor standards, it has to do with environmental standards, and has been functioning pretty well, is my understanding. Yes, they do. And there will be a copy of that at bwi.org, at the Building and Woodworkers International's own webpage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim, for your testimony.
You're welcome.
And now we are actually moving a little bit in the agenda. So the next speaker is Reverend Margaret Morcane. I hope I pronounced your family name correctly.
You just think like Christmas card, then put more in front of it, Margaret. So I was thinking about this, I felt that none of us really should need to be here. That the situation between the employees and IKEA should be able to be resolved with the kind of corporate leadership by IKEA that would put it in the front of being an ethical employer. So really, none of us should need to be here. IKEA has had the opportunity at this time to show itself as a leader in addressing real issues of the union representing the employees in regards to wages and benefits and working conditions. Yet here we are. IKEA has missed an opportunity as a corporate leader. So we are gathered together to call upon IKEA to take the high road and address the real issues brought forward by the union on behalf of the employees. These are wages and benefits and working conditions that allow for the well-being of the employee and in turn for their families. All of us are connected. The well-being of each employee in earning a wage and benefits acknowledged by the membership in their vote brings something of value to the larger community when they have what they need. We too as a community benefit. The larger community benefits as the employee, the union, and IKEA have the kind of contract that acknowledges the value of the work of the employees. What happens to one part of our community happens to all of us. And we are deeply linked. We are deeply linked as the arm is to the shoulder, is to the hand, is to the body. And we all need one another. The situation for the employees at IKEA is a breaking apart for all of us. It is destructive for the individual employees, as we've heard today, involved. It's destructive for the union, but it is also a breaking apart of what is good and just and value for the whole. We need to name together, as we've heard from others, what it is that we value as a society. What are the values we want to live by? And our values are shown in how we act. We can speak how we want, but our values are really shown in our action. Ikea Corporation and Ikea Management, Richmond, have the opportunity now to create a new beginning. They can be known by separating employee from employee, decreasing wages and health plans. This is the value that is being shown at this time, where they can choose a new value and act on it. The value of leadership in bringing employees together, working with the union, and practicing a style of a corporation that contributes to the well-being of the employees and makes IKEA stand out as an ethical employer. So they can choose. They can choose a new value, and they can act upon it, and they can become known. In their founding, as it has been spoken of today, they can be known as an ethical employer and an ethical corporation. Thank you.
First, we have to ask the married man some questions.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about your role in the Richmond community or the Vancouver community and what it is that got you involved in your engagement with this particular dispute?
I'm involved in a broad-based organization that brings together labor and religious communities, community organizations, educational, small business, and it's just an understanding that as we work together that it's a contribution to the whole. And this is a very specific issue that needs a just outcome. I'm also quite involved in areas of reconciliation and restorative justice. And as the previous speaker has spoken about, we need ways in which there can be dialogue and just solutions.
Okay, just a quick question. I'm just thinking ahead to the future when there is a result to this dispute. Is there anything you could share with the IKEA workers here about sort of mending those fences? I mean, in any sort of dispute, you have opposing sides and a lot of tension and difficulty. So I'm just thinking, like, how can people overcome that when we eventually do all have to work together? So.
Well, of course, listening, being willing to listen, being willing to find a way to what brings us together in the common good. And certainly from the Christian tradition, we're taught to love our enemy and to find ways to overcome those differences. And I think when there's been a just solution, when there's finally been a coming together, that already you have a beginning. And then we have to work out the interpersonal relationships.
Thank you very much, Reverend Morgan. The next speaker is Michael McCarthy Flynn. He's the coordinator for Living Wage Group in Washington, BC.
Actually, I'm here and I'm coordinating here. I'm not based in Washington. My name, as you said, that's okay, that's okay. I haven't met you either. My name is Michael McCarthy Flynn. I'm the Living Wage for Families campaign organiser. I would like to thank the organiser of this commission and the participants in the commission for making this happen. I think it's a very important process that we're going through here today. I've been asked to put some context on the labour dispute in terms of what are wages by in Vancouver, because wages aren't an end in themselves, they're a mean to an end. And understanding the relationship between the wages in the collective agreement or the past collective agreement and what they can actually buy in Vancouver, I think is very important. What our campaign about is looking at what we consider is a living wage for Metro Vancouver. And the concept of the living wage is a very simple and basic concept. It's what the wage is for a family to be able to cover the basic living expenses. This concept is quite old. It goes back to Christian theology, and it's been taken up really in the 90s in the US because of the rise of working poor, and it's been taken up in Canada because we've had a similar rise of working poor. So there's been a need not just to presume that somebody has a job that they will be not living in poverty. That presumption is a presumption. In fact, there's a significant amount of people who are working who are living in poverty. So the goal behind the living wage campaign is to calculate scientifically what a worker needs to earn to be able to meet their basic expenses, and that's what we've done. For Metro Vancouver, we calculate that a living wage is $19.62. That's taken into account the most common family unit within BC, which is 2 parents working full-time with 2 children. It's based on the expenses, basket of expenses that each family would need to cover their basic expenses. It covers items like transportation, it covers items like food, clothing, it covers items like household expenses. And the data sources we've used to calculate these household expenses are all accepted data sources, mostly from Statistics Canada or the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, but also from organisations like the Dietitians of Canada, who bring out what it costs to be able to afford a healthy diet every year. Our methodology has been accepted and looked at. It's now used in 31 cities in Canada to calculate what a living wage is. For my brief conversations with the union, the Teamsters involved, I would estimate that up to 70% of Ikea workers at the moment don't earn a living wage. What this means is very simple. From our research with workers earning less than a living wage, it has significant impacts on their health, it has significant impacts on their relationships, and if they have children, it has significant impacts on their children. In terms, often, when people don't make ends meet by one job they have to take a second or even third job. I won't go into all the statistical details about the impacts. People can go to our website and see them there. I think I'll finish with a quote. Not many people know that when Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, he was campaigning on a living wage campaign rather than a civil rights campaign. And a month or so before he was shot, he said, "Do you know that most of the poor people in our country are working every day? They are making wages so low that they cannot begin to function in the mainstream of economic life of our nation. These are the facts that must be seen, and it is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis and a full-time job getting part-time income." I think it's important to remember within this labour dispute that what is happening is a retrograde measure, and the idea of workers earning a living wage isn't even on the table. So I think that should be taken into consideration in your deliberations. Thank you.
Questions from the panel?
Well, more observation really. It's great that community organising is up and well in Vancouver. When Labour meets the community properly, it brings home what the impact is. It demonstrates it much more clearly. I've had some experience of this in London with London Citizens. I've worked with them. They were a board-based organising community organisation, and their key issue was the London living wage. It's made a massive difference in London to people's lives, getting a living wage. You cannot explain what it means to thousands of people who suddenly shift up a wage scale, what their kids can now do, what opportunities are open for them, so on and so forth. So I understand the arguments you made, and I accept them completely.
Okay, and we have taken a lot of guidance from what's happened in London. We've been very lucky to have one of the senior organisers who was involved there, Deborah Lippman, over here in Vancouver with MBA, who's been giving us a lot of good advice.
Thanks, Michael. I'm just wondering as well about the connection between a living wage and unions and collective bargaining. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that connection?
What our campaign tries to do is to move beyond the collective bargaining approach. Often, and this isn't the case in Ikea, often the case, low-wage workers are in service industries that are contracted out, and the collective bargaining process doesn't really give them the opportunity to negotiate for a living wage. What we more target is the holder of that contract who we may have leverage over, whether that's a public sector institution or a corporate entity who has worries about the brand or being associated with poverty wages. So that's more our strategy rather than trying to bring it up, is changing the context where this is brought up and including community partners in this, demonstrating the impact that this has in the community rather than the traditional collective bargaining approach. Thank you.
Thank you all for taking your time to come into this public hearing. The next person up to speak is one of the IKEA employees. The podium is yours.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the commission for coming here, and thank you for having us organized. My name is Julia Buchek, and I am one of the more junior employees at IKEA Richmond. My 3rd year anniversary is actually tomorrow. Yeah, I know, I looked at my name tag. Sorry, I'm just out of breath. I would have never thought that the world's largest furniture chain would play such a large role in my life, both in a positive and a negative way. But I've only hit my 3rd year anniversary with IKEA this week. I suppose I'm really thankful for having an opportunity to show my perspective up here. But I'm only a part-time coworker. I think it's important to have everyone's perspective shown with how labor dispute has affected each of us. Growing up, IKEA has always been a huge part of my life. My parents immigrated to Canada. Of course, like many newcomers to Canada, they come to IKEA and set up their entire home with IKEA furniture. Growing up, I have been exposed to IKEA, specifically Richmond IKEA. I actually have fond memories as a child at Richmond IKEA. I would get really excited about getting a catalog in the mail. I would get really excited about family trips to IKEA, decorating my room, and even as a teenager and as a broke student right now, having a sense of independence in decorating my place. So with IKEA in terms of my career, I still have a lot of family in Poland, and in Poland, IKEA is extremely popular, as is with the rest of Europe. So my cousin landed a job at IKEA a few years ago in Poland with communications and interior design, and he also worked at a factory in Warsaw. He landed a job because his best friend's stepdad was actually one of the heads of IKEA Poland. So he would always boast about how fantastic it is working for IKEA Poland, even though it does have its problems now, as I've been told. And since my love for IKEA, ever since I was a child, has been pretty obvious, I thought I'd apply at IKEA. Sorry. So once I applied with IKEA, well, before I applied at IKEA, I worked at a different furniture store. It was a smaller boutique, but it was going bankrupt and closing all of its Canadian branches. So I decided to apply at IKEA, and I was just looking for another part-time job to work in between school. I received the job a day after my interview, and I was absolutely ecstatic about working for IKEA. Not only did I get to work in the store where many of my childhood memories were made, but I also had a chance to fully immerse myself in the IKEA way of life, which I've grown up knowing that it's such a positive and interesting environment to be in. So I was completely enthusiastic about doing all the lessons on the computer, filling in all the workbooks, going to training sessions, and of course getting to eat meatballs every day. Love the meatballs still, even if they might have horse meat, but let's not get into that. Anyway, so even though I'm a student at UBC and I'm studying international relations, once I got a job at IKEA, I've always kind of considered, incorporating IKEA into my career potentially. So I'd look at jobs on our IKEA database, and I would find fantastic jobs that would completely relate to my degree. working in Sweden, working in Europe, working on a global basis. So I really had my heart set on working for Ikea in the long term, even if I was going to school and working part-time right now. Along with all the fantastic experiences I had at the beginning of my career at Ikea, I've also got to meet many wonderful people that I work with, that we're standing out with on a picket line every day. And my cousin was truly right. Ikea is a wonderful place to work. After the initial honeymoon, I was fully integrated into the work environment, and I began to notice little flaws here and there. Obviously, with retail, I worked in retail for about 6 or 7 years since I was 16, so kind of sick of customer service jobs, but Ikea, I really had my heart set on Ikea. But the flaws were kind of unusual for, I guess, a typical retail environment that I had experienced. Why are sales goals so unrealistically high? Why don't we ever meet these goals? Why are we constantly pushed to sell when there's no one to sell to? Why do I get in trouble when I'm doing crucial tasks instead of hounding and following customers every minute of my shift? We're not on commission. Why do we go through management so often? I have not gone through management. In the 3 years I've been there, I've not had so many managers in one workplace as I have with Ikea. Why do I have such a painfully difficult time asking for a single day off if I can't switch it? And I know this applies to many of my coworkers as well. Why am I questioned so heavily about my condition when I call in sick, something I rarely do? Why are us sales coworkers being taught to manage deliveries and other tasks as well? Why are we expected to do so much more than what we're doing already? Why do I feel like I need to pull my hair out and have a few drinks after each weekend shift? This could go on. Sorry if I'm very informal, but this is a different perspective from a part-time coworker. So I don't really have as much experience as knowledge as many of my fellow coworkers, but I'm just trying to get my perspective. Anyways, the environment became a little bit more frustrating, not nearly as enjoyable as I originally perceived it to be, with all this constant pressure. I began to question all of these techniques that were being integrated into our work life. It's like Mark has mentioned, we have become machines to sell. The care wasn't really there, and it wasn't what I imagined it to be originally, especially from the upper level to us coworkers. Since I've only worked for the company for 3 years, I wasn't really familiar with the previous management of the store, but the grumbling from my fellow senior coworkers proved that this isn't how Ikea has normally functioned in the past. Then came the talks of a labor dispute and the new contract. This was my first job where I was a part of a union, so it was all new to me, but it was still extremely intriguing and thought it was something I could learn a lot from. A coworker and I got called to the back office to speak with our manager about the new contract being offered. He was sitting in a room with a small group of coworkers from other departments. Majority of us in the group were newer coworkers like myself, so none of us really had questions at the end to hammer the management with. But rather, we sat in silence as the manager looked confident with the offer she was handing us. The feeling in the room was actually really awkward, as we all knew the contract was a huge farce. So what does this mean for people such as myself? Even though I'm simply a part-time coworker who even considered staying with the company long-term, I was perfectly happy with the old contract, just like everyone else. When I first started working at Ikea, I was ecstatic about finally finding a solid, secure, part-time job in which I could advance easily in, which could help pay my bills through a company I really looked up to. Because I was working at Ikea part-time while being a full-time student, I wasn't really, I guess, as affected as some of my fellow coworkers were. I'm still lucky to receive medical and dental from UBC, but that's about it. Part-time or full-time, there's still a huge problem here that's affecting every one of us in one way or another. I may still have my medical, but I could barely pay my bills each month while trekking out on transit to Richmond every single weekend. My hours were fairly decent at the beginning of my Ikea career, since I started at the old store, so I was pretty lucky to be one of the only few coworkers that were hired then, up until the build-up and the new store. So up until the lockout, my hours were on a downward slope, as were many of my coworkers' hours, which I was receiving about 4 to 12 hours a week on average. And since I'm such a, I guess, lower level junior employee, that meant about $50 to $140 a week. New employees were consistently being hired in my department after the new store opened, which meant a further dispersal of hours, which generally meant me racking up a whopping 10 hours a week on average, if I'm lucky. At that point, I was wondering if coming out to Richmond was even worth it anymore, when I could have found a minimum wage job elsewhere with a lot more hours, at least on weekends. No matter how much I tried, it would still be difficult for myself to pick up extra hours, as everyone else was attempting to do the same to fill their schedules up. Calculating my average pay, I had about an average of $100 a week, which totals up to $400 a month. Now, everyone who has grown up or lives in Vancouver knows this is just completely ridiculous. My rent costs $400 a month, and I don't even live in Vancouver. Besides for rent, I have no money to pay for food, transportation, or tuition, let alone fancy stuff like going out to one movie every few months. So, like a massive amount of Vancouverites knows, it means we're dead stuck living below the poverty line. It has been calculated, like just mentioned, that the living wage in Vancouver is $19.62. Of course, this completely varies, as we have to take into account the location, the living situation, groceries, and all that. But Vancouver is the second most unaffordable city on earth, first being Hong Kong. So I can see $19 an hour being extremely realistic. And though many of us have been aware of this reality for quite some time, scraping by with my minimum wage student jobs, I thought it would be different with Ikea. Looking at the agreements I signed when I accepted a position with the company, a small, albeit significant raise every year, getting top rate just after 4 or 5 years, I thought I really scored it big time, being able to have a part-time job while studying full-time without much worries. Well, with this new contract, my job with Ikea will be just like any other job in any other retail store, with the added politics and the negativity in that big blue box that all of us out on the picket line actually had a pleasure of experiencing already, all the negativity coming from the inside out onto our line. My situation might not be nearly as dire as many of my fellow coworkers' situations, but regardless, this entire labor dispute and what IKEA is trying to pin on us affects each and every single one of us, even in the tiniest ways. The company I have grown up to love and admire has become one big corporate machine, at least in North America, and it's just kind of upsetting to see that the original Swedish values that we have all looked up to and regarded in such a positive way are just going down the drain on this side of the planet. Regardless, all of us are fighting not only for the little details that apply to each and every one of us, but also as a whole to beat the corporate greed that has taken over what was once a humble and democratic company. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. I think you touched on so many different topics.
Yeah, I kind of told my life story. I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you for that.
All right, thank
because,
you.
You did so well in sort of explaining the details of each of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
In retail, often it's not just about work, it's not just about wages, it's also about hours, especially for part-time workers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm just I think that was really impacting because often we hear that in the media, especially and publicly, that union members are just about wages. But you seem to portray the perspective that you're quite happy with kind of the contract as is, and that was the approach of a lot of folks going into the bargain.
Exactly. We don't want anything more. We just want to keep our old contract. It was fine the way it was.
You mentioned this was your first experience of a union bargaining round, a union action. Can you tell us a bit about why you're still here, why you've got up and spoken today, what it means to be on the picket line for you personally?
Well, for one perspective, being from Vancouver, I think it's important to have a fair and just wage, especially living in the city. I feel like many people who grew up here can't afford to live here anymore, and they have to leave and go elsewhere. And this is where I was born and raised, so I'd like to stay here, and I'd like to, afford a place to live here and afford my school. And I know many people are in the same boat as me. So I think a union job is pretty much one of the main ways to actually keep the wages up and to, have a hold on a livable wage in Vancouver, because there isn't really any other way. Vancouver doesn't have as many industries as, say, Alberta or many head offices such as Ontario. So I think a union job in Vancouver unions in Vancouver in general are really crucial for people who want to make a living here. And I think unions are important to keep control of all the corporate greed that's going on in North America nowadays. So, thank you.
The next speaker is also an employee of Ikea, Marcus Rubel. The podium is yours.
It took a little bit longer than I thought. My name is Marcus Hubel. I've been an employee for IKEA for 20 months, 6 of those standing on the line. So 14 months I've been an IKEA employee. I'm just going to take you to a little story, a little bit of the story. See if I can read my phone. Okay. I'll quickly tell you a little story about how I got where I am today. I've worked part-time for 6 years as a carer for people with disabilities. Good job, but I was looking to do something different. I wanted change. I've been a resident of Richmond my whole life. I used to be a regular shopper at IKEA. I'm sure some of the long-term employees even watched me in the mall pit. I grew up believing IKEA was a good place to work, always remembering family and friends saying they treat workers very well. Great management team, friendly environment, good pay, good benefits. I would hear of employees who've made their jobs a career and have been employed with IKEA for years. Every day, twice a day, I was driving over the 9th Street Bridge to go to and from work. Over a long period of time, I noticed a giant building that was starting to be built. It even had its very own highway entrance. They still haven't figured out how to use that highway entrance they have. I thought to myself, they're building a brand new IKEA, and they're definitely going to be hiring soon. I had applied a couple times in the past years, but no luck. I even signed up and I sold Christmas trees. Every Christmas when they had Christmas trees. Still, no luck. I finally applied the last time at the new store. It was almost completed, and I got the job. I was excited, looking at this as a career, not just as a job. When walking down the halls and seeing the pictures of the longevity of IKEA workers still working here, I wanted to be part of that. Job security is hard to find out there in this crazy world. And here I thought I got it. I was getting married soon, and I was willing to work 2 jobs for the next little while and hope for work to be full-time employee at IKEA. I wanted to help build a future for my wife, myself, and my family, and I wished I had some. So I was getting shifts I wanted to work towards getting to top rate with good benefits and a full-time position. I would have had to work for 4 years to get top rate with the old contract. But now with this new contract that IKEA is trying to impose, it'll take me over a decade to reach top rate. Like a decade, that's impossible. Like, why would I stay there? It's unrealistic. I just recently got married in April, enjoyed a great honeymoon, and everything in life was going good. Until I showed up to work, mid-May we were locked out. So here I am, out on the streets, standing outside a store that I thought so highly of, and I had fought so hard to get into. Now I have a new passion, to stand out here with my brothers and sisters at IKEA and realize the mistakes, that IKEA realizes their mistakes, that we have great workers, and great workers are hard to find. Thank you.
I'd like to ask, I mean, you've been there 14 months, so can you tell us a bit about how you developed so quickly a sense of solidarity that you just expressed with your co-workers, and how that manifests itself now with you being on the picket line?
Well, like I said, when I first got hired, I saw a lot of people that have been at a company that's trained very good people for so many years, and watching them struggle for ends meet for their families, it just shows me the solidarity. And my dad, he worked for Rogers that turned into Shaw at the time, and they put him in the early 90s on the line for 9 months to try to break their union. And I asked him, I said, is it worth it to stand on the line? And he said, you know what, I did it for the future of other coworkers. I never did it just for whoever. So for me, I'm a part-time employee right now, but I believe the same he did. And I believe in unions, and I think right now that, you know, we need solidarity. It's a hard world out there.
Just to kind of build on your comments there, would you say that this experience has maybe brought you and your coworkers together?
Oh, for sure. I only knew cash employees when I first started. Now I know pretty much a lot of the departments of, you know, spending hours in the night. You know, it's cold out there. We just have a tent and a heater, so either we talk to each other, talk about Candy Crush scores. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Now we have one more IKEA employee who will speak and give the testimony, and it's Koros Shokrosade.
Oh, no. I'm a backup.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank you very much for coming here. We really appreciate your input about everything, and we hope you can take the message to Sweden so they know what's going on here. Because I lived in Sweden for about 12 years before I moved to Vancouver. I am a 3 years IKEA employee. And the way that the Sweden run is not the way the IKEA run here. The way that was I presume the IKEA in Sweden was, when I came to the company starting, they told me about the IKEA culture that I was so much related to the Swedish culture. And the Swedish culture is one of the greatest in the world. And actually, they are very fair. They are to think about the people who's living there should have a good life. Working is a privilege in Sweden. When you are working, you are honored. Doesn't matter what you do. As you take out the garbage, or you are the professor in university. Doesn't matter. You are a worker, and the worker is much respected. And what I thought when I started here, going to be the same thing. I come to the Swedish culture. I'm expected to receive the same thing. But unfortunately, I see so much contradiction about that. What they are preaching, they are what they are doing. And that's what something that kind of very much is disappointing for me. I don't have any notes, I don't have anything, just speaking from my heart. So just forgive me. Anyway, the only thing is, I just, as one of those 300 fellow co-workers who's working right here, right now, standing here, I'm not representing them, I'm just one of them. And in this respect, I'm going to tell you that how much going to affect my family during this 6 months dispute has been there. I have to find another part-time job to be able to basically support my family. That's a very important part. And that's something that I think is not connected between the company and the human side of the company. Basically, those who's working there is not just a number and profit. Those are people who have their life. They have kids, they have a family, they have something to do. For example, if you give somebody 10 hours a week as a part-timer, how you can expect you're going to stay there for a long time? How can you build a career based on that one?
So I work as a part-timer too, but I was fortunate to pick up the hours in the different department. They call me for a hours hunter, because I try to just make as much as possible, come to about 30, 40 hours a week. I was fortunate that I come to the return department about 1 year ago, and they offered me 30 hours guarantee position, and that was very good. But the thing is, still I'm looking for another 10 hours.